Welcome back, you beautiful souls. Thank you so much for joining us. It is with some trepidation that I approach this one because it is going to be a difficult discussion, but I think one that we can all benefit from having, especially as we are commemorating something for the first time here in South Africa, National Grief Awareness Day. And I think it's a really important step forward. While this is obviously an established day across the world, it's the first time that South Africa is officially recognizing this day. Now, National Grief Awareness Day hopes to encourage open communication on loss and bereavement and better inform the public on the facts of grief and maybe the repercussions if we don't deal with it properly. And with us to chat about this day is author of the Grief Handbook, someone we had a pleasure of obviously bringing onto the show a while ago, Bridget McNulty, Shivani Ranchod, who is the co-founder of Aligned and Swansong, as well as advocacy manager at the Hospice Palliative Care Association of South Africa, Lee Maynard. Welcome to the show, ladies.
Thank you.
It is a difficult one to broach because I think everyone has a personal perspective on grief, but it's a different journey for everybody, and it's loaded with so much baggage, as we've kind of hit on in our previous discussion. Maybe, Lee, I can start with you. As someone who works in this space, in your experience, how have you been able to kind of wrap your head around what grief actually is? What's going on in our bodies during this time?
I think that's probably the hardest question because the answer is grief isn't one thing. I think one of the things that people are fascinated by and liberated to hear is that who knew grief is a very physical process?
Yeah.
We think it's an emotional process, it's crying, but it comes with brain fog, it comes with muscle aches, it's on every level.
It's overwhelming,
and we all experience it so differently. So because of that, we might not even know we're experiencing grief. We might, so this is why days like this are so important, so we can broaden the definition, we can discuss all the different ways, because there isn't one standard way to do it or experience it.
And it almost, by its almost definition, you are experiencing it. It's not something that you're doing, it's something that's actually happening to you. And your body needs to go through that, I think, very often to let go of a lot of that anxiety and that physical stress. When we look at grief and mourning, how would you define those two things in terms of their difference?
So grief is generally seen as the internal experience. So it's how you're feeling, what you're thinking, the physical side of it, as Lee was saying. And then mourning is our external expression of that.
Okay.
And it's funny because I think as South Africans, and I don't know that there's any culture who's particularly good at it, but I think as South Africans, we're very awkward around grief. And so there's this weird pressure on the person who's grieving to get over it as quickly as possible and put on a happy face, even if it's not a real happy face, to make other people feel comfortable. And so, like Lee said, I'm so grateful to be here, and I think it's so important for us to be talking about this, just to normalize that grief can take a long time, and everyone does it differently, and there's no right or wrong way, and however you're feeling is exactly how you should be feeling.
It's got to happen how it's got to happen, and you've just got to ride that wave. That being said, Shivani, I've heard it spoken of 5 stages of grief. I know this is a spectrum that we're moving across here, so that's oversimplifying it, but does that kind of align with your thinking? What would those 5 stages be?
So it is, I mean, there's a lot of wisdom. It's Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's model. And the stages are denial, I think, which we can all relate to. Anger, which I think we can relate to bargaining, depression, and acceptance. I think the thing that's tricky, though, in our sort of Western linear minds is thinking of them as stages, as opposed to, things that you cycle through. You may not touch on all of them. And I mean, acceptance in particular isn't a given.
I was going to say, because they're 4 very negative, heavy things, and then this beautiful golden light of acceptance, like it just comes at some point.
No, and it requires active work, active processing, and integration. I think integration for me is actually, I think, a better word than acceptance, because it's like, how do you learn to live with it? How do you integrate it into your life, as opposed to arriving at some sort of end?
Because sometimes it's not acceptable. Sometimes you can't actually deal with the level of loss.
Yes.
But you still have to move on.
Yes.
And so some more sophisticated models, not to say that's not a sophisticated model, but that model has also nuanced. And there's a sixth stage too, which is making meaning. It's a very creative, active act. So your child died of a rare disease, you might start championing, raising awareness around that rare disease, or your mother loved a particular tree, and so you plant more of those trees. There is a way we all also somehow over time make meaning in creative, surprising ways.
That's why I wrote the book.
I was just about to say, you have no idea. I would say about 70% of the amazing people doing incredible things that I've been lucky enough to interview, unfortunately, have had to go through that gateway. So maybe there is this dynamic and energy that maybe we're not quite able to define yet, but the bottom line is it's awful, and it grinds you down, and it's something that you feel, you experience physically, you feel it emotionally, and you struggle to understand it intellectually, which is, I think, why today is so important, because we can think about it, and you've got some great minds working in this space to help you think this through this morning. We might not arrive at that resolution, but hopefully we can light a bulb for you. So please, if you've got any insights or first-hand experience, drop us a voice note, 063 408 8863. We'd love to hear from you.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back. Thank you so much for rejoining a very important conversation today. We are sitting down with the author of The Grief Handbook, Bridget McNulty Shivani Ranchard, who is the co-founder of Aligned and Swan Song, as well as advocacy manager at the Hospice Palliative Care Association for South Africa, Lee Meinert. And we are talking about grief in general at the moment, and we want you to please join that conversation. Drop us a voice note. You can be anonymous if you want to, 063 408 8863. And in fact, we've had a couple of contributions coming through, so let's hear from you right now.
Morning, Expresso family.
Morning.
Good morning, everyone, with the viewers. Look, I am not good at comforting someone who's actually crying on the grieving way. But if someone grieves, like there are those who grieves inside, then I'm always there for that person. I'm being a friend. I just being a friend, and I always talk to that person, and I always let that person talk to me. That's how I support that person. But I'm not good at comforting someone who's actually crying. No sentu mcimeli engqamakwe.
It is difficult. Don't worry, you're not alone. I think that's the human condition. We all struggle in the face of the ugly cry. There is a reason for that. Do we have any more voice notes? Let's get one more in.
Good morning, Team Expresso.
Good morning.
Ikram here from Atlantis. With regard to the question on the socials, what do you think is the best way to support someone that is grieving? I can tell you right now, I've experienced grief and loss in my life, and I've also supported others going through the same. But what I can tell you what not to do is that you should never push that person to get over their grief. Never put a time limit on it. Allow that person to grieve at his or her own rate. It is not up to you. No matter who you are, you can't tell people when to stop grieving. Thank you.
Thank you. Clearly, he's been through it. And it's crazy. I think you want to help a person, so you want to fast forward that process as much as possible, because you want to pull them out of that trauma, especially the ugly phase of that grieving, where it can get very real. That being said, what should we do you think? What is the first step, knowing that no one size fits all? How do we approach a situation as dynamic as this?
So to me, you want to be as practical as possible. I wrote the book after my mom died very suddenly, and people were so kind, and I really appreciated that. But a lot of people said to me, let me know if there's anything I can do to help. And I was like, I can't even choose what I'm wearing in the morning. Like, having to get up and face the day is too much. I can't now articulate what I need and then reach out to a specific person and ask for it. And so I just didn't ask for help. Whereas if you can say to someone, can I drop off dinner on Tuesday at 5 p.m, I won't stay. Or I'm at the shops, do you need anything? Or can I look after your kids for 2 hours so you can lie down and have a nap? Like, really very specific things that they can say yes or no to, I think are very helpful.
What do we need to get over then to approach someone who is grieving to be useful, to be practical, to get over our own nonsense, I suppose, because we can't help but being triggered, I suppose, because we've all got some kind of relationship to grief. How then do we get our mind into the right place to be able to effectively help someone, do you think?
I mean, I think part of the awkwardness is our disconnection from nature and from kind of the natural cycles of life, you know, that it is part of the human experience. And I do think there's something about the, I don't know, sort of broader societal structures, I would say like capitalist structures about being useful and productive that creates this kind of false idea
stigma,
about, you know, you get 2 days of family responsibility leave and then you need to show up at work and, you know.
Get 2 weeks of paternity leave, you get 3 days of grieving leave.
Yeah, get over it. Like, come back to work and be you know, a productive member of society.
Yeah.
So I think there's the individual work of, like, getting over our sort of awkwardness and actually not making it so much about you. And actually thinking about the other person. Which isn't, I mean, we've all had those moments of
so
awkwardness.
hard.
It's so hard. It's so hard. And often it's only when you've been through it yourself that you know then what helps and what doesn't help.
I mean, there's no frame of reference. How do you speak to someone who's lost a child? What do you say? As a parent, how do you wrap your... And I knew this conversation was going to break me at some point, but it's this level of where it is so far removed what you can just wrap your head around, let alone offer help to someone else. It's natural. We've got to go through these grieving processes, however that looks like for us. When does it need to stop in terms of when does it start to damage us beyond the natural kind of life cycle, if you will, of a grieving process? When do we need to have someone either step in or we need to see someone to break that cycle? When is it unhealthy?
Bridget, you wrote beautifully about this in your book and also where it starts to overlap with complex post-traumatic stress disorder. I think you're the best person to speak to that.
So what I found interesting was that there's this term called complicated grief. And so technically, normal grief lasts around 3 months to a year. And complicated grief is if after a year you're still struggling to get through the basic functions of daily life, then it's time to ask for help. I think unhealthy is the wrong word because it's not that you're doing something wrong. It's often that there's mitigating factors. So like COVID was a mitigating factor. A lot of people didn't get to say proper goodbyes. Or if there's a second loss soon after the first one, or if you were unable to mourn the person properly. Again, with COVID, that happened so much. So I think a lot of South Africans are probably in complicated grief at the moment. And the point with it is really to say you don't have to suffer alone. Like this isn't something that you have to just take a deep breath and forge through. There are so many people who are there to offer help.
If anything, we now have one shared human experience. We've all been through one thing together. And I think I raised this with you the last time I had you here. I was going through a real reality check where I couldn't match the level of loss for COVID with the apparent danger in my own life, in my own situation. Then I met a man who had lost his wife and both of his parents to COVID in a very short space of time. And people are grieving right now. I think the whole world has lost something over the last couple of years. And especially when there's an overlap with trauma and grief, I can understand how complicated that can actually become. So please, if you've got a perspective, share it with us. If you've been through this, 063 408 8863, or even if you just want to ask a question, we've got an amazing panel here for you today.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back. Thank you so much for joining the final installment of this really, really interesting and rewarding conversation so far. We've got the author of the Grief Handbook, which is an unbelievably wonderful and practical handbook that you can use through the stages of grief, Bridget McNulty. Then we've got Shivani Ranchard, who is the co-founder of Aligned and Swansong, as well as a grief counsellor, Lee Mainitz. They're still with us to wrap up the conversation around grief. And of course, you guys have been weighing in with your voice notes. Let's hear a couple of those right now.
I lost my husband 3 months ago.
Wow.
And I'm at a stage of anger. It's terrible. It's very hard. I just wish I could get to the stage of acceptance.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm going to open it up to any one of you before we get into our voice note. Why is that anger there? Why do we react like that? What's going on in the mind, in the body? I don't know who wants to take that.
I mean, I just think it's so natural, right?
Yeah.
Someone that you love isn't here anymore, and why were they taken and someone else wasn't taken? I think it's so hard, but it's so natural, and acceptance takes a really long time. My mom died 3 years ago. I think I'm maybe finally approaching it, and there's no rush. You just have to take it at your own pace and be kind to yourself on
And I
the
suppose
journey.
it's letting go of the notion, not accepting that they're gone. That's unacceptable, we get that. But you're accepting that you can move forward.
Learn to
and
live with it.
Yes, and I think, and it's about rebuilding trust
Yeah.
in yourself,
Yeah.
that you can be with your experience as it is, the reality of your experience. But just to say about anger, I think it's often felt as an unacceptable emotion.
Yeah.
Like there's something, you're like, there's something bad about
You're not
feeling
allowed,
angry.
yeah.
And I think that this is where those stages of grief are useful. It's in that model because it is a normal part of the process.
At least it's action, I suppose.
Yeah.
At least it's something,
Yes, and a lot of the rest of it can feel heavy and blocked
Stuck.
and stuck.
Yeah.
So at least the anger has some movement to it.
Push back a little bit. I
And
get
let it
that,
out.
Yeah. Let it out. Thank you for that very brave voice note this morning, and our condolences to you. Let's hear another voice note.
Morning, Expresso. My name is Abisala Machola.
Morning.
The only way I can think of is just to let them be. When they want to cry, be a shoulder to cry on. When they want to talk, be an ear to them, Just listen to them, be there for them. There's nothing really you can do. Just let them be.
That's exactly it. Nothing. We feel powerless, but sometimes just being is still an act. It's still something. And let's squeeze in one more voice note.
A very good morning to my Expresso family. The best way to support a grieving family or friend is by consoling them, to have empathy and to pray for them. And if they want to cry, especially when they can cry, because they say cowboys don't cry, but in this case, everybody can cry, even cowboys can cry. Thank you, Johnson. Have a good day.
Thank you so much. Some amazing voice notes. Clearly people are thinking about this. Maybe let's wrap this up with a practical approach. What does your course offer? How can people connect with you if someone is going through something right now and just needs to hit that reset button? How do they do it?
So I wrote the book, as you know, but books aren't for everyone, and sometimes it's that even a book is too hard to engage with. So Shivani and a friend of ours, Claire Louise Thomas, and I have created the Grief Course, which is an empathetic guide to help you on your grief journey. We're offering it for free on a donation basis, so if you feel called to offer something, you can.
Excuse me, brilliant.
And it's really a very gentle, there's no expectations, it's self-paced, there's reflections, there's meditations. Shivani's done some beautiful meditations. Claire's created some really lovely activities to help you move through the various stages of grief. And you can find out about it on griefcourse.com.
Shivani, why is a platform like this so important? Why does it help?
I think so that you don't feel so alone, that there's some element of shared experience. But we've brought in tools like poetry and photography and the meditations because of the non-linearity of it, that sometimes to get into the emotion, to be able to be present to it, these other forms actually, give us access.
And the arts are amazing. I was joking about how many amazing musicians I've had come here, bare their souls as they've written albums to process, and they've come through it a better person for it, or a stronger person. They've been able to let something go. Lee, to wrap this up, advice for someone who's in the thick of it right now. I know it's very difficult when you're in that maelstrom and it just feels like you're in the eye of the storm, but there is help. There are ways that you can move forward. What is that first step, do you think?
So we're talking practical things, and I've just found it so wonderful meeting Bridget and finding her book. When just say, for example, all around us, people are encountering grief. Now, and you want to do something, right? Now, instead of buying a bunch of flowers or I buy Bridget's book. And sometimes I buy a pack of pencils too, because they're beautiful colouring exercises. And I wrap it up beautifully and I give it, and it's cheaper than a bunch of flowers. So if people listening today wanted...
10 Rand a copy from Take A Lot goes to the Hospice Palliative Care Association.
Hospices were really helpful when Bridget's mum passed away. So also, if you buy it on Take A Lot, Bridget's book on Take A Lot, 10 Rand will also go to the hospices that I work for. So there's a, you know, when we're looking for what do I do, there's a wonderful practical resource. If you are grieving or someone you know is grieving, go look for that book on Take A Lot. It's brilliant.
I love that, because that's all you need. It's just that first step, just some practical first step. Bridget, I'm gonna close up with you, because you really you've written something that it's a life's work, and it's amazing how these things can come together. And I'm so sorry that you had to go through such a difficult process to get to that point. But through this distilling of this knowledge, what is that one thing that was said to you, or that one moment that really did help you? And I'm reaching out for that person who is looking to help the one they love, the people that they love the most. What can we do?
Honestly, the best advice I was given was one day at a time. We think we have to be good at grief and master it and move through it and solve it. And we don't. We just have to take it one day at a time. And if one day is too hard, then you take it half a day at a time, or an hour at a time, or a breath at a time. We really are all in this together, and that was the best advice I was given.
And there are people around you. You might not see them, that there are people surrounding you right now. Let's close out, because you guys have been amazing throughout this conversation. Let's close out with one more voice note.
Hi, good morning. Speaking to Laika, I just want to say that I think everybody do deal with this differently. And my mom passed away like 7 years ago, and it was like a very, very big shock. She passed away, she had an asthma attack. And it was like very, very sudden, and it was like a very, very big shock. And the thing that healed me was like taking one day at a time and telling myself that, you know, she's in a better place and that she's not suffering anymore. And that is what was actually healing me. And that, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone for sharing. Thank you for connecting with us on this very authentic level. I think that's what we all strive for at the moment, is human connection. And if our grief is preventing us from connecting with our families, from connecting with our children, our colleagues, the people around us, we need to move through it. Yeah. We might not ever be able to truly let go, but at least we've got our people, our tribe around us to help. And if you are needing to talk to someone right this second, there is a number you can call right now, 0800 567 567. There are some incredible people on the end of that line working for the Depression and Anxiety Group. They will talk you through whatever you are going through, and at least put you in contact with the right people, the right community, so that you can take a step forward. But to this amazing panel, guys, thank you so much. Managed to make it through it without bawling my eyes out. Just a major step forward. We've made work. We're progressing. We're not quite at the point of acceptance yet, but we are making massive headway, and hopefully this has helped you in just a little and very practical way as well.